So, Big 12 football media days kickoff tomorrow in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. And it is a very interesting time in the Big 12. And there's a lot of conversations around what's next for the Big 12, what the future of the Big 12 looks like. And I will continue to tell you, there's no need to rush in to the next generation of the Big 12. And I thought it was interesting that all 767 million of you sent me articles about Big 12 expansion this weekend that did not come to fruition. And I don't know where all of this always comes from, but I will say the Big 12 is in good shape. And I think we have this knee-jerk reaction where we always want to improve and we always want to grow. Maybe what the right thing to do is we get ready to kick off Big 12 Media Days in Las Vegas, where they just broke the record for the hottest day ever in Las Vegas at 120 degrees. Maybe the right thing to do here is to do nothing at all. Go into the season and have a plan in place, theadvocates.com, and react when opportunity presents itself. That to me seems far more, prudent, if you will, than getting into these conversations about what idiot, guy said on the interwebs about who the ACC was going to let go to the Big 12. I think we put ourselves in these positions where we wind up dreaming and we wind up believing that the Big 12 is some behemoth conference that it simply is not. And I think that's the other thing as we head into these Big 12 football media days that you need to wrap your arms around. The Big 12 is not the Big 10 or the SEC, and that's okay.
Facts.
The Big 12 doesn't have to be the biggest and best of everything in college football. They are neither capable, nor do I believe that those in power in the Big 12 want to be the Big 10 or the SEC. It's just not who this conference is now or has ever been. And I understand Texas and Oklahoma left this conference for dead. But I'm sorry to break it to you, the Big 12 is not dying anytime soon. In fact, I think it's just the opposite of that. I think you are in a position as the Big 12 where you are on the kickoff of the season of your life. And again, I know it's uncouth in certain parts of this country, Oklahoma, to talk about the struggles of the blue bloods, supposedly blue bloods of this conference, and how much energy a program like Utah will bring to the top of the Big 12. But that's where you are. And I think you have to embrace that. And Jake, at some point, I think everybody in the Big 12 needs to stop talking about when expansion's going to happen.
And I think everyone, it has decent intentions with it, right? I mean, we only talk about expansion for the Big 12 because we feel like the Big 10 and the SEC are pulling away from the Big 12, right? I mean, if you think about it, that's why everyone always wants the Big 12 to expand, because we feel like, hey, the Big 12 is the one conference that isn't the Big 10 and the SEC, that if they expand, maybe, they could run down those two conferences, or maybe, they could close that gap. And I think, a lot of people are just thinking of it the wrong way. Like, I don't think there necessarily has to be constant expansion in the Big 12. There doesn't always have to be, a new team coming into the conference, for the conference to be successful and to be heading in the right direction. I do think that there is instability just in the concept that everyone's always talking about your conference changing. I think it would be good for the Big 12 to have a season or two where they can get on real stable footing and have just some semblance of consistency in the conference. Like, obviously, the ACC situation is ongoing. It is ever developing, right? Like, with their grant of rights and everything going on over there. So for the Big 12 right now, I think the focus has to be making sure that you just have a strong football season. Make sure that, K-State is up to par. Make sure that, Iowa State has a good year. Make sure that Texas Tech and Baylor, all your blue bloods, if you will, of the conference have good seasons. Because if you do that, and if you have a strong showing in the first year of the expanding college football playoff, you're going to be fine. You're going to be in a perfectly fine spot. And by the way, I do think it's always a pragmatic point to bring up the fact that Brett Yormark is elite when it comes to the business of doing college athletics. And I think that alone should allow Big 12 fan and Big 12 country to feel good about where the conference is going, because this is somebody who's always thinking about revenue generation, always thinking about how can we push the conference forward from a money standpoint. He's not thinking about how can we just compete and, constantly try to run down these two juggernauts of a conference, because ultimately there is no running down the Big Ten and the SEC. They're on a different planet from a revenue standpoint. So all the Big 12 needs to do is play their role in the landscape, continue to grow, continue to be healthy, and you're going to be in a great spot, which is why I say this is why we get articles like this over the weekend where people are like, oh, well, hey, is expansion happening? What conspiracies can we drum up out of the ACC this time? I think that people love that, and I just don't think the Big 12 needs that right now.
No, and I think the Big 12 is at a place in time where you just need to focus on the state of Texas developing and winning football games. And I continue to tell you, Baylor is one of the biggest failures in college football that we've seen lately. Like the decision not to fire Dave Aranda is horrendous. I don't understand it. I look at Texas Tech. I think with Baron Morton back this year, I think it is incredibly important that Texas Tech take a big step forward. How long are you going to have Taj Brooks at your disposal? I think that is a huge question. And I look at Texas Tech, and I think you just had bad coaching execution last year. And I think it killed you. I think that you are in a season where if you do not hold Joey McGuire and his staff accountable for anything less than 8, 9, 10 wins, I think you are sending a message loud and clear that you're not focused on winning. It is that simple. If this team does not win at a very high level, and I'm not saying that's going to be easy, you should be disappointed in that. TCU, by all accounts, is going to be between 8 and 10 in the Big 12. That would be a massive disappointment. The state of Texas has to produce. You know that Houston is going to struggle this year. Arguably, they're going to be dead last among the 16 teams, which, hey, man, that would be not great. But you understand that they're in transition. But if you look at the programs in Texas, in the state of Texas, I think they're absolutely pivotal for this conference. Yet you have a mind-numbing decision like Dave Aranda at Baylor. You have all these questions surrounding Texas Tech. I don't, in my opinion, see anything more important than kickoff getting here in the state of Texas for the Big 12. It is that simple. I think that who I don't even think it's close. You know who the best team in this conference is. Mm-hmm. I think it is Utah.
Mm-hmm.
My question is more, who's going to be that number 2 team? Who is it? Is K-State really this good? I mean, you lost a ton of talent offensively. You have an unknown at quarterback in Manhattan. I don't know that you could put K-State in that number 2 spot. I don't think that you can put Oklahoma State in that number 2 spot. With the DUI distraction going on around Ollie Gordon, I don't know. I truly do not know who is going to be that number 2 team, and I truly do not know how good Oklahoma State's going to be. Well, Alan Bowman's a mid-level quarterback at best.
Yeah, and I think that the Big 12, is their goal should be to get 3 teams into the college football playoff. I think obviously your conference champion is going to be there, which most people just assume is going to be Utah, but your conference champion is going to be there. And then it would be nice if you had Oklahoma State in the college football playoff. It'd be nice if somehow, some way you had another, highly competitive 10-win team in the conference. That would be great for the conference. But unfortunately, I don't see the Big 12 doing that. I don't see 3 teams being in the playoff. No. I see your conference champion, and if you're lucky, one more team getting in. And I think what's hard for the conference right now is that, to your point, you don't know who that's going to be. It's not easy to say, well, Mike Gundy, he's going to get into the college football playoff because, frankly, he hasn't gotten into the college football playoff. Avery Johnson and K-State, don't know what you're going to do, Avery. Don't know who you are yet. Don't know how good you can be. A lot of people in Manhattan are singing your praises and saying you're going to be this incredible quarterback. And Will Howard, be Will Howard first and then be better. And then we can start, talking about K-State being, as good as they were. Because I think people like to write off guys like Will Howard when they leave the conference. You love to say Texas isn't back. Will Howard, who, you love to point out and just write off these guys. But I'm telling you, man, like, these are talented individuals who are no longer in the conference, and there is a price to be paid for that, which is once again why the situations like Baylor and Texas Tech and, just these oddball things that happen in this conference can't continue to happen. You need brands like Texas Tech to be good. And until that happens, the conference isn't going to realize its top end potential. We're going to continue to talk about chasing these other two conferences, and we're going to continue to talk about expansion until you can have 3 or 4 teams that are really tried and true and reliable.
The expansion thing is head scratching to me. I am, and we talked about it several months ago with the Duke and North Carolina situation. Nothing has changed, and there's no reason for anything to have changed. And all of the jackwagons out there saying that, expansion's coming. It's not coming. Nothing is going to happen in haste. Nothing is going to happen quickly. What is the trigger to have expansion in this conference? It would only be if the ACC melted down. They don't have time to melt down. It's July 8th. We are just weeks away from most camps. And you're going to make the argument that the ACC somehow is going to melt down. It's not going to happen in short order. Now, if a lawsuit gets settled okay, let's revisit it. But does it seem likely to anybody that Florida State or Clemson or that any of those lawsuits get settled today quickly? They would have happened already. And it has not happened. The timeline does not favor it. And I don't understand the appetite for destruction in the ACC at this moment because it behooves nobody. It doesn't help Florida State. And this is why all the candy-ass bullshit about, Florida State's going to play as an independent next year. That was never happening.
No.
You're talking about a school that's trying to improve its financial situation, yet the moment that people started just throwing this against the wall that they were going to be independent, everybody ran with it. There's never a scenario that made them successful as an independent. Not one single scenario. There's no reason. There's no trigger. There's no pressure. There's no pain point that would make the ACC melt down today, right now. There is not one. And if you're one of those people and a member of the media that's going to go to Vegas this week and ask Brett Yormark about expansion, based on what are you asking that question? Based on what? He's had almost a flawless tenure as the commissioner of the Big-12.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just based on thirst. That's it. There's no events. There's no action items, as I call them. There's nothing that says, yeah, this happened, so that means expansion's coming. I mean, if when we were talking about it months ago, obviously it's no secret Brett Yormark and every commissioner in college football talks to a lot of people, and people have relationships, they have conversations, but that doesn't mean that expansion's happening tomorrow. I do think that, Brett Yormark and the Big-12 have to understand what their options would be, but that doesn't mean that expansion's happening tomorrow. And I think there's such a thirst for it because people love drama in college football. They want, the ACC to melt down and the Big-12 to pick up the pieces. And that's why the Pac-12 thing was such a lightning rod in college football, because people were already hating on the Pac-12 before it became clear they weren't going to survive. And then when they didn't survive, in the Big Ten and everybody started picking up the pieces, people love that. So that's why I say, man, it's not I completely agree. There will be people tomorrow and Wednesday who ask, oh, well, Brett, what if Duke comes available? What if, what about, what's the situation with Gonzaga? What about, I'm telling you, man, this guy's got relationships and he's prepared, but that doesn't mean that we should be out here, gaslighting Twitter or the media with, hey, well, my sources are saying that expansion's happening next week. Because it's not, there's no way for it to happen.
Yeah, and I understand why, and a lot of people sent me this article about, and I'm not going to mention the idiot's name, that, ACC's melting down. It's not melting down. And anybody writing articles today telling you, and I use article, anybody putting words on the interwebs saying that the ACC is melting down, come on. And anybody saying that they know the schools that the ACC is going to, you don't know that.
By the way, when's the last time you heard from Florida State? When's the last time you heard from anybody?
It's not beneficial for them to be talking.
Like
you're in the middle. And I think people don't understand that you're in the middle of what is a process is going to determine your financial viability moving forward. And the idea that you would constantly be out talking about this makes no sense. It just does not make sense. And I think that this process will play out as the months and days and years tick away. College football will continue to change and evolve until we get to a Super League. And I think that's 2 years away, because I think you're in a very good position to just have calm waters, calm seas. Mm-hmm. See how these next 12 months, but see how these next 6 months play out. How does this season play out? How does change in the recruiting windows change? How does the transfer portal rule and the lawsuits and the settlements and the NIL and the this and the that, how does all that change? This situation at Utah State, if you are not paying attention to the situation at Utah State, it is a massive Title IX scandal going on at Utah State. Pay attention to that, because if you're not, and you don't understand the implications that's going to have across football in this country, you're crazy. Because I'm telling you, all of these things set precedents. And so the water's very calm right now. And I think that's what these commissioners want. I think they know they need to go through a season where there is not upheaval and change. And let's just see how much money everybody makes. Let's see. Everybody's pronounced that, Brett Yormark's a failure. I love that on the SEC shows, that Brett Yormark's a failure as a commissioner, because the revenue dispersal for the Big-12 was record-breaking, but still embarrassed. Okay, great. Let it all play out. Let it all play out. Let everybody have their say, and then let's see who puts the results up. And I think that's why this football season, and with Big 12 football media days tomorrow kicking off in Vegas, I think it's just a really critical time to see who wins. If Utah walks into this league and wins this conference, and my belief is on paper, they will win this conference. If that happens, I think it is a very, very bad indicator that this league does not have a blue blood. And it's not Okie Light. I will continue to evangelize for that. And I hope that every Oklahoma State fan in this world can come in here in November and December and celebrate I had one guy telling me, oh, we're going undefeated. Okay, come back and celebrate your undefeated season. Let's see that happen. Because if Alan Bowman can lead any offense to an undefeated season, man, maybe I should just stop doing this show.
Yeah, and I think the amount of disrespect that people are showing the Utah defense, I don't think you understand. It's not because what Oklahoma State fans specifically likes to do is they like to say, oh, well, roster, and we got a bunch of returning guys, and, it's the mullet, and, it's Stillwater, and we got all this great stuff. And all I'm here to say is you're talking about a program in Salt Lake that dominates the defensive rankings for like a decade now. This is someone in Kyle Whittingham who week of knows how to watch your game tape and break you down and exploit your weaknesses. And I do think that it sends a really bad message nationally if they walk in there and just beat the hell out of this conference like most people think they will. And by the way, I think it's warranted for people to think that. I think that people didn't put enough respect on the Pac-12. You didn't, all of a sudden now that Oregon's in the Big 10, every recruit and their mom seems to be committing. And everyone's like, oh my God, Oregon. Oregon's been doing that, man. Like Oregon's been a national brand. I just can't believe that people don't understand where and who Utah's had to play to get to where they are now. And I really feel like coming into this season, if Utah comes in here and wins this conference, like I do think that conversation we had about like performance metrics coming down from the commissioner's office. Like, hey, if you're a 3-win team and you're not going to fire your head coach and you're not going to care about winning on the football field, and then you're going to get, pissy with us about this, disbursement, that's a conversation I think the Big 12 out of any conference has to start having, because you don't have that issue in the SEC. The difference is the SEC is just so damn good at the top. The lower end teams have no business winning any games, so you can write it off. But the Big 12 could be that conference that is competitive from top to bottom on any given week. And that's what I think has to change for the Big 12 moving forward.
Yeah, and I think the media poll, as you see right here, the one that should scare you is Arizona at 5. If I'm Iowa State, West Virginia, the problem is West Virginia is so reliant on the run. But I think UCF's going to have a better season than most people think. How is Texas Tech 9th? TCU 10th. Now, we're also talking about a group of dudes who usually don't know shit from Shinola when it comes to who's going to win what.
Yeah.
But how is BYU 13th, Houston 15th? And you look at the very bottom, Arizona State 16th. I mean, Arizona's the one there that really stuns me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you lost Jed Fish. You lost a lot of talent. Now, the Fighting Fafitas, as I affectionately call Arizona football, they've still got talent. I think they had a really good coach. Like, I can't see him being top 5. Are you telling me that Matt Campbell's going to finish behind Arizona?
Yeah, I have a lot of trouble with that.
Are you telling me? And so I look at some of this stuff and I say to myself, okay, K-State, great conversation around K-State. You have massive seismic change on that roster. And you're telling me that Avery's going to be able to step into that starting spot? And I think wildly unproven. I know that everybody tends to get excited about Avery Johnson and everything that he did, and 296 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns, and that guy's never been asked to be the guy. He has never been asked. It is so much easier to be the guy when you're just backing up Will Howard and hoping he fails so you get your shot.
Yeah, when the expectation is, hey, whatever we get out of you, bud's going to be good enough. Yeah, that's a little different than, hey, you're coming in as our starter to this season, the unquestioned number 1, and the responsibility is on your shoulders. So when K-State is down 10 in the third quarter, what's it going to be, right? When you're playing a tough team on the road, you've got some injuries maybe to your line, let's say, adversity's hitting. Well, what is Avery Johnson going to be? Because we know that he's got dual threat capability, but I just think we can't get ahead of him. Let him show you what he really is.
AJ or Avery or KJ Jefferson.
See, because you know who KJ is.
If KJ Jefferson is good, UCF is going to win some games that you have no belief they can win. And you bring back Harvey, you have KJ Jefferson. I think you look at their schedule. I think you look at the advantage they have at the bounce house. I don't think this is going to be the gimme conference everybody makes it out to be. I, again, point to BYU and the BYU. I tell you that Jake Retzloff, I believe he's the starting quarterback at BYU. I know they say they're going to have a camp battle. You are only doing that to give respect to Bohannon. Jake Retzloff is the starting quarterback at BYU. And I think it is incredibly important that BYU have a top 10 finish in this conference. And I think you cannot win. I don't even know that just winning 6 games is enough at BYU.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my question. Like in the Big 12, what's a top 10 finish? Is 7 wins top 10 in the Big 12? Because that's
a very interesting question.
Because like if you look at it from a conference perspective, like 7 wins is, like 7 wins in the Big 10 is okay. Because the Big 10 used to be this weak conference. So to be anything in the Big 10, you had to have like 8-9 wins. But now I think with the depth the Big Ten's added, 7 wins is, for most teams who are not regulars in the CFP, is a pretty solid season. But I'm not going to sit here and look at this list of Big 12 teams and be like, yeah, Baylor has any business in the 7-win conversation. Houston, the Natty.
But look
right?
at UCF's schedule.
Mhm.
And this is why and I know every time we talk about UCF on this show, we routinely hear the guy that'll come in from Lubbock, the guy that'll come in from Stillwater, the guy that'll come in from Manhattan. UCF ain't nothing. Okay, well, I just remind you that Gus went out and did everything he could do to improve the talent on his roster. Their schedule is New Hampshire, Sam Houston, at TCU. So your first road game is a team that's picked bottom half of the Big 12.
Yeah.
At TCU. Colorado at home, at Florida. So your second road game is a guy that's probably going to get fired when the season's over. Let that sink in. Your 2 road games are at TCU and then at Florida.
So being generous or being conservative, 4-1.
I think you're, let's call it, you're going to New Hampshire, Sam Houston. I think you win at TCU. I think you beat Colorado. I think you are 4-1, and you're going to lose one of those 2 road games.
Yeah.
And that Florida game is going to have heat. I think we all know it. Cincinnati is let's call it your 5th win. At Iowa State is your 2nd loss. BYU is your 6th win. Arizona is your 7th win. At Arizona State's your 8th win. I think it's going to be tough to go to Morgantown and win because they just run the ball.
Yeah.
I think you're going to lose to Utah's going to be a very close game. Now, that is November 29th. That's at UCF. That's in the bounce house. You potentially could win 9 games here.
Yeah, if your quarterback's still healthy at that point, you're in that game.
That's why I'm saying we can all just sit here.
Think about that. I mean, if a team like UCF has, let's call it 8 wins, realistically, 9 wins is top of the mountain. Give them 8, as a true predictor.
In year 2.
Yeah, in year 2 in the Big 12. So if they've got 8, let's say BYU's got 7. What does that do to the rest of the conference? Because if UCF has 8, BYU's got 7, that means Arizona lost several games. And that means that number 5 ranking in the preseason poll is, obviously is trash. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that on its face, if you were someone who followed the Pac-12, you know that the Arizona ranking's generous. By anybody's stretch, it's generous. Because, like you said, new head coach, you've got a lot of change there. To say that they're going to come into this conference and be number 5 is very generous.
Very generous. But again, I'm fascinated by K-State. So look at K-State's schedule. Let's pick them to win the conference. What is that? I think that's 1 loss. And you can win the conference. UT Martin at Tulane. Early test at Tulane. Arizona. Now that game's in Manhattan. Okay, we'll give you the win there. At BYU. Okay, we'll give you the win there. Home for Oklahoma State.
If you're going to win the conference, you're winning that game.
Okay, so at that point, you're 5-0. At Colorado, at West Virginia.
So I think you win at Colorado, West Virginia, not sure.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I would mark that as a loss.
You would mark that as a loss.
The West Virginia game, yeah, I think you mark that as a loss. So you're already 7-1?
7-1.
Okay.
Kansas in Manhattan.
8-1.
Rivalry game. Okay, 8-1. At Houston, 9-1.
Yeah.
Arizona State, 10-1.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, 11-1. At Iowa State, 11-2. Is that realistic? Is that a realistic 11-2? If they win 11 games, they'll win the conference.
Yeah.
Now, my opinion is I don't think you're beating Kansas. My opinion is I don't think you're beating West Virginia if they're healthy and they run the ball.
Yeah.
You're not beating West Virginia.
So that's 9 wins.
And I think that BYU game is going to be very, very difficult.
So
very difficult.
So let's say they're a 9-win team. And so Utah wins a conference. K-State comes in second with 9 wins. Is 9 wins good enough to scrape into the playoff?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is because you got to look around the rest of college football. And again, I know that fat-faced Chip Kelly didn't want to be a head coach anymore. And I totally understand it. Anybody take the time to look at Ohio State's schedule?
undefeated on deck?
I don't think they lose a game or have a competitive game until they are at Austin in October. I think Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, at Michigan State, Iowa, and I'm hoping Iowa fields an offensive team this year, but that has not been confirmed. You're 5-0 going to Oregon in what is, man, the game of the year in that conference to that point. That is the game because I think Oregon's going to be very good as well.
Oh, and look at after. So this is the funny thing about Ohio State's schedule. So the Oregon game kind of splits their schedule in half in a sense where, you've got pretty much an easy run up to the Oregon game. You should be healthy. You should be in a great spot to go on the road and play that game. So let's say you win that game because I don't think it's just a gimme. I think Dan Lanning. I think the thing that Ohio State is going to deal with when you play these Pac-12 teams, specifically Oregon, is the physicality. Ohio State showed that they could be had physically. Now, obviously, we need to say that a ton of talent was added. Obviously, the stakes are extremely high for Ryan Day this season. I think it's not an exaggeration. It's not a stretch. It's not anything crazy to say that if you do not go out and win the Big Ten this year, and frankly, if you don't go out and compete for a national championship this year, that he may get fired. And just because of that, I think you have to count on them to win games like Oregon. But that physicality that Dan Lanning's bringing, if you think that Dan Lanning is not sitting here saying, hey, year one in the Big Ten, we're going to go out and win the Big Ten and we're going to shock the world, you're out of your mind because I guarantee you that's what he's selling.
Ohio State gave up 11.2 points a game last year. Good defense, right? They added Caleb Downs, Jack Sawyer, and Denzel Burke. That's going to be the best defense in the country. So let's say they give up 15 points a game.
So how does a team like Oregon beat that type of defense? Well, you're going to have to run the football. You're going to have to beat them at the point of attack. That's how you beat that defense.
And you're going to have Will Howard and Devin Brown duking it out to be the starting quarterback in fall camp. I think they're going to score. I think they'll average 30 points a game. I think they will. I think Quinshon Judkins was a huge pickup for them. Like, in my opinion, dude, I don't know how you beat them, but I think I'm never giving anybody an edge over Dan Lanning at home.
No.
Ever. So I think they lose the Oregon game. That'll be their only loss of the year.
But think about how Washington was able to go to Oregon and win that game. What did they need? They needed elite quarterback play, and you had to have elite wide receiver play. And what does Ohio State have? They've got elite quarterback play, and they've got elite wide receiver play. So they have what they need to win the game. The question's going to be who on that day when they play that football game has more want to, because ultimately when you've got two of the best teams in college football, because they're both some of the best teams we have in college football, who has more want to? And that to me is why if Ryan Day loses that game, you can really come down on him, man, because he should win that game.
I think the biggest question is, can Dylan Gabriel replace Bo Nix? Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm.
Can Dylan Gabriel replace Bo Nix?
Bo Nix is playing well.
I think that's the biggest question. I have no idea what the answer to that question is. I am not certain by any stretch of the imagination, but I believe in Dylan Gabriel. We've talked about it on this show before. I think it's one of the most impactful transfers of the entire window. And I think what he did defensively, and I think the work that Bo Nix, put in to build that program, I think Dylan Gabriel fits in there with that defense. I think Oregon's going to be number 2 in that conference because I think Michigan's going to have a steep fall off. Anyway, all of that to say, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Big 12 to put 3 teams in the playoff.
Yeah.
Because I also think USC's in for a rebound. I also think that the Big 10 is going to be, I think the Big 10 is going to be incredibly difficult. And I think if Michigan finishes top 5, again, James Franklin, Penn State, I don't know what to believe in that. But I think it'll be very interesting to see what this happens. Can Lincoln Riley play defense? He fired Alex Grinch. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's going to be very interesting.
But
I
what
think,
do you know about SC? You know that offense is going to show up, and for that alone, playing in the Big Ten, that's going to be fun to watch because the Big Ten, historically speaking, has been a ground and pound. We're going to run the football. We're going to play physical football type conference, and that's not what SC is. And I think bringing that different style to the conference will be really interesting to see because again, if you have 1 week, Ohio State playing Oregon in maybe what is a little bit lower scoring of a game, like a 35-27 kind of game. And then SC comes in and you got to play them.
USC gave up 34.5 points a game last year.
Yeah. So if you're playing Ohio State, Ohio State's putting up 40 in that game. For sure.
Well, Deanna Lynn's a pretty good defensive coordinator. I think he showed that at UCLA.
Yeah.
And I still can't believe he went to USC, but here nor there. I just cannot believe they'll be that bad. I think they will give up 20-something, not 30-something. That would be shocking.
I hope. I'm tired of talking about Lincoln, not getting to where he needs to be because of the defensive side. That at some point, you got to do something about that.
Yeah, I think I wonder if Jaden Mayava gets that job. Miller Moss, Jaden Mayava, that's going to be anyway. The Big Ten's going to be very good. The SEC is going to get 4 teams in. You can just mark that down. So, again, back to the original genesis of the conversation. How many playoff teams? If Utah wins the conference.
Is the second team 10 wins? So, Utah wins the conference. Is that second team a 10-win football team? Because that's what it's going to take, I think. Because, again, like you just said, the SEC is going to have 4. I'm inclined to think that the Big Ten is going to have at least 3.
How many games does Texas Tech win?
8.
Abilene, at Washington State, North Texas.
See, I can't just write off Washington State, though. You can't, because you're at Washington State. You can't just write that off, bro.
Game.
Like, that's not an easy game.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. That is 8 o'clock. That game is 8 o'clock. Dude, that's 2 months from today.
Best case scenario, you win that ball game. So you're 2-0 heading to where?
You're 2-0 going to North Texas, 3-0, 4-0 against Arizona State, 5-0 against Cincinnati, and then you're going to Tucson. You got to go play Arizona in Tucson, where apparently, I don't know if you guys know this, it's always hot in Arizona.
So best case scenario, you win that game.
Let's say you're 6-0 at that point. Baylor 7-0 at TCU.
See, that feels like a game you would lose. Last year's Texas Tech team loses that game.
Yeah.
But again, we're not talking about last year's team.
I think you're 8-0. You're going to lose at Iowa State to be 8-1.
Mm-hmm.
9-1 against Colorado. 9-2 after you lose to Okie State. And then I think you beat West Virginia to win 10 games. If I am a Texas Tech fan and they don't win 10 games, I would be massively disappointed.
So Utah wins a conference. Tech's got 10 wins.
What about I'm trying to find who the surprising team is.
Well, I think nationally BYU is going to be the surprising team. I think BYU at 7 wins would surprise people.
Their schedule, if BYU, I'm telling you, if BYU wins their first 5 games, they could make some real noise. If they lose that K-State game at home and they're 4-1 after Baylor, which is at Baylor, they bring Arizona in, Oklahoma State comes in, and then you're just getting kicked in the nuts for a month. Arizona, Oklahoma State, at UCF, at Utah, home for Kansas, and then you play at Arizona State and home for Houston. That's 7 wins. Because I think they're Southern Illinois, SMU, at SMU. Does BYU win at SMU?
I want to say yes, but it's not a gimme. I mean, as harsh as that is, BYU fan, it's not a gimme. It's not.
But SMU's in the ACC now, and
it's the pipeline to Texas.
And they have all that money,
County, bro.
And they own Dallas. It says it right on the front of their uniforms.
All money.
All money. I'm going to give them 3-0, and I'm going to say they're 3-1 after K-State. 4-1 at Baylor. 5-1 home for Arizona. 5-2 Oklahoma State.
But see, that game's the one we've been talking about right there. So from a conference perspective,
8-15.
Yeah, that Oklahoma State
9-15 Central
BYU game is one you need to circle. I don't care what team you're a fan of in Big 12 country. If you are a Big 12 football fan, you will watch BYU and Oklahoma State at Stadium of Fire in the middle of the night. Yes, you need to watch that game.
That's going to be tough. Anyway.
Yeah.
So that's where we come down on it. In the comment section, hit it right now. Who wins the Big 12 and how many teams do you think they put in the college football playoff? I think Utah wins the Big 12. I think they get 3 in. I think they get Utah, K-State, and Okie Light. And I think, man.
So if the Big 12's got 3 in, there's going to be a lot of teams that get piped. Because if SEC's got 4, and let's just say the Big 10's got 4, in worst case scenario, that's
11.
And then you've got the Big 12 with 3. That's 11.
And I think so my question is, who doesn't get 4 in? It's going to be the Big 10. And I ask how many ACC teams get into the college football playoff? Because I also think you look at the ACC and you start asking yourself, okay, well, is Clemson that guy?
I don't think we can say that they are until they show that they are again. Like the conversation we've been having this morning on and off about, Avery Johnson and K-State and how they've kind of reloaded and this is supposed to be a great season for them. You're not really hearing that in Clemsonville. You're not hearing that out of Dabo's team. And again, it's the same conversation. Transfer portal is not something he wants. Like, we're not getting a ton of new talent in. So if that's the case, then if Clemson's not available in the college football playoff to that conference, you're asking one team, and that's Florida State.
DJ Uiagalelei. Again, we talk about it all the time. It's his 3rd program. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. I mean, obviously, you would assume that Miami is going to take a huge leap forward. I think they finished 2nd. Cam Ward, did you guys hear about this Elite 11? No, it wasn't even Elite 11. Cam Ward going, how good is Cam Ward?
Very talented.
Because he went off on Shedeur Sanders in these workouts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Shedeur Sanders is probably the odds-on favorite to be the top quarterback picked in the coming a year from now in the NFL draft. And Cam Ward telling him he's lazy, he's not working hard, he's not taking it seriously after showing up late, Cam, for the workout. How good is Cam Ward? I think that's a huge question mark.
Well, the right out of the gate, Cam Ward's got a huge arm, great passer. He has a great mentality playing the position. Those are the things you love about him. I mean, I don't know, talking trash. These guys talk trash every day, bro. I mean, that's what they do. So,
yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, I bring up the AC because SMU is picked 7th by most people in the ACC. So I'm very interested to see, can they stay healthy? Can Rhett Lashley really move that team into the top half of the ACC? It's not a good football conference. I think we all know that. But can they do that? And I think it's a huge question. And I think that you're going to have to figure out how good they are. And I think that Preston Stone, as Oak State James has so often pleasured himself to videos and pictures of Stone on this show in the comment section. Oh, God, Preston Stone, you're so. Oh. Do you know how hard Stone is?
He's hard as a rock.
Oh, Stoney.
Yes.
Right? Like it is. We'll see. We'll see. The ACC is going to get 2 teams in my opinion. They'll get 2.
See, and I think the thing is, who gets more in, the ACC or the Big 12? Because
I think the Big 12 will get hosed. I think the Big 12, if a conference is getting hosed, it's the Big 12. And again, not to be a jackwagon, but screw you, Mike Gundy. This is your fault. Because most people believe that they're not going to finish top of the conference. And I think Mike Gundy is a very unlikable figure amongst his peers. And I think the biggest question is, let's say that Mike Gundy wins 10 games but doesn't compete, doesn't make the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah.
Are you putting Oklahoma State in?
No. I don't think you are. I don't think you're putting Oak State in over, a borderline Miami team, are you? Are
you putting Oklahoma State in over a borderline USC team? Are you, and for shits and giggles, are you, if you look at the SEC, let's say Texas wins the SEC, but Georgia, Alabama, anybody see Lane Kiffin's girlfriend?
Dude.
Anybody see Lane Kiffin's girlfriend? And the only reason I bring this up is because Lane Kiffin, the Lane Train, my guy, the sex machine known as Lane Kiffin, is winning in life. I believe she's 18 years old in one day. No, she's in her 20s easily. You better have a big fish, Lane.
Cock.
Just saying. Because good old Lane Train, he's winning on and off the field, friends. I don't know how many other perverted things I can say. She is
smoke show.
It's a nice fish you got there, Lane.
Yeah.
Right? Come on now. Would it shock you if Lane Train got into the college football playoff?
No, it wouldn't at all. And I think that that's the hard part about the SEC. I mean, if something radical like that were to happen, Texas winning the SEC, because I do think that would be pretty radical. But it's not crazy to say that Texas could be 9-10 wins in the SEC. That's not crazy at all. But you look at the ledger here, like you've got obviously Georgia, Bama.
I think it is Texas wins the conference, Georgia 2, Ole Miss 3, Alabama 4. And I think they're all going. I think they're all going to the college football playoff.
Is there a limit on how many SEC teams we can, that the committee would put in?
I think you could get 12 in.
Like, dude, going down the list.
I said, I think is there a limit? I think you could get 12 into the. I think the biggest disappointment in the SEC this year will be my good friend Brian Kelly, who I think is
Gary.
I think okay? Here's my question: who has a better season, Oklahoma or LSU?
Man, I don't know. That's tough.
Because I look at this conference, and I look at Texas. And that defense is going to be top 5 defense in the country amongst, and I think this will be, and remember, good old Uncle Monty told you, I think this is going to be one of the best defensive seasons we've ever seen in college football. I think you look at the top of every conference, best defense in the Big 10, Ohio State. Best defense in the SEC, I have no earthly idea. I think Georgia's amazing. I think Texas's defense, Jesus.
Don't undersell Bama, man.
I'm telling you right now, I do not, but speaking of Jesus, I don't believe he could run the A-gap against Texas, even though he walks on water. I don't believe that he could. I'm telling you. I look at like adding Isaiah Bond to that offense Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden from Houston. Like, what are we? Are you out of your mind? I don't know how Texas loses a game this year. They're so incredible. You can look at their schedule. I was looking at this last night while laying naked in bed, and I was saying to myself, I look at this schedule. Who's more talented than Texas right now? I don't know either, because I don't think anybody's more talented than Texas. They are deep, bro. And they are explosive. And yes, I understand that Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, and I don't know how you replace that.